Over the last 24 hours, it's become apparent to me that the number one need for this LSU football program as we start to look to 2025 is pass catchers. And specifically right now, wide receivers. They do need a tight end, and we'll talk about that. But you've got a couple of guys there who can play the position. You need a different skill set. That's on the back burner for right now. I'm talking wide receivers. And we briefly talked about this yesterday. We have found out over the last 3 days that you have lost C.J. Daniels. You knew you were going to lose Kyron Lacey. And you now look up at Shelton Sampson is gone, and you see that Cal Parker's coming off an injury. And you kind of look around, you're going, okay, Xavier Thomas, Aaron Anderson, Kyle Parker, gotcha. But you've got guys there who are your only productive returning players who are kind of the same. Anderson, Thomas, Parker, they're all 6 feet or under. They're all pretty quick, pretty shifty, pretty fast. I would say Anderson's the shiftiest. Thomas is the fastest. Kyle Parker's probably the best route runner. But none of those guys are going to be significant vertical threats routinely. None of those guys are going to jump up and high point the football often in the red zone. You need a dude. You need Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas and Terrace Marshall and Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson. You need a number one dude. And that's obvious. And I think unless Garrett Nussmeier bolts, if he goes to the draft or enters the transfer portal, which is always possible, I think he's going to stay, but it's always possible. Unless he bolts, this becomes the number one need to me. And that is going to be the litmus test for how aggressive LSU is allowed to be in this era. I don't know for sure what has happened in every single instance of transfer portal recruiting and high school recruiting. I don't know exactly what happened with Jakeem Stewart. I don't know exactly what happened with Harlem Berry. I don't know exactly what happened with DeCorian Moore. I don't know exactly what happened with DJ Pickett. Like, I can't point to every example and know exactly how things came together. But we can read the tea leaves and feel like either LSU was just flat out bid because they couldn't keep up with some of these bids, or LSU played it a little bit more conservatively to save funds for elsewhere once X player's dollar amount got above where they were comfortable with. I don't know. But we have heard from Brian Kelly, from folks who talk to those in the collective world, LSU is going to be aggressive in the transfer portal. Okay, well, if you tell me that, this is the position where you got to go get aggressive. And if LSU comes back a little bit empty-handed at wide receiver, that's not going to be because they didn't see a need. That's going to be because they couldn't. And that'll be the litmus test, in my opinion. That's the position I'm looking at. Yes, they need help at other places. You need an offensive lineman. You need a quarterback. But it's not a starting quarterback. So you're not getting into the Cam Ward bidding process. You're talking about going to the top of the list at wide receiver because that's where LSU's got to be. And that's the water I think LSU can swim in with wide receivers. Why? Because the pitch is pretty damn good. If you look at the NFL right now and you see the top 2 wide receivers in yards this season, that's Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson. Now, this staff did not coach those players, but it certainly doesn't hurt. They're about to be the highest 2 paid wide receivers in the history of the National Football League. Back up to the guys that did play for this staff. Malik Neighbors leads rookies in receiving yards this year in terms of yards per game. He's been hurt a little bit. And by the way, his quarterback clan is pathetic. Daniel Jones, Drew Lock, and Tommy DeVito. And Malik Neighbors is still leading rookies in receiving yards per game. Brian Thomas is 4th on that list. So you look at getting guys into the NFL, nobody's got a better cast of characters than LSU. Alabama's is really good. Ohio State's is really good. USC's got a good stake to that claim. But LSU's is right there with anybody. You look at the ability to step in and play, you got it. LSU has had better than 55% of its receiving yards and catches walk out the door here. You got to include Josh Williams there and Mason Taylor there, not necessarily wide receivers, but you've got a lot of footballs to be caught. And oh, by the way, as of this moment, the quarterback, one of the best returning in the country. I didn't say the best. I don't know. I didn't say he was a guaranteed first-round draft pick. I didn't say he was going to win the Heisman Trophy. But Garrett Nussmeier, this year, in an offense that wasn't humming all year long, but that was pretty productive, finished in the top 2 in the SEC in just about every passing category there is. So you've got everything that a wide receiver could want here. A staff that can develop you, the ability to get to the field quickly, a quarterback already in place, the SEC, the best competition in the country. The only variable that I can't speak to directly here is money. And if LSU doesn't land one of the top wide receivers in the transfer portal, then that's a bad sign of where LSU sits in this landscape of college football. I have made the comment that I think LSU is going to have a lot of trouble in this landscape getting the number 1 player in the nation from well outside of this footprint. Bryce Underwood's going to be hard for LSU to get no matter what, because you're essentially going to have to outbid everybody at that point, and having to outbid everybody is tough. But as long as you can be competitive and then offer everything else that comes with LSU, which is what I think happened with DJ Pickett and Harlem Berry and Carius Kern, I think that's what happened with those guys. Well, you can swim in those waters. And we've been told that LSU's got cash ready to go, and that they've had money freed up from Bryce Underwood and freed up from DeCorian Moore and freed up from Jakeem Stewart, freed up from Cade Phillips. Okay, well, it's free. Here's where it's got to go. Again, until Garrett Nussmeier tells me he's leaving, this is the number 1 goal for me. They got to get some other things. But I don't believe that LSU is going to field a Joe Moore award-winning offensive line next year. That's my contention as we sit here on December the 6th. I think they can put together a good offensive line. I think they have a good offensive line coach. I think they've got some young talent, and I think they're going to go to the transfer portal and kind of try to see what they can cobble together there. But my gut tells me that LSU's best aspect of its offense next year is probably going to be in the air with Garrett Nussmeier. So you need to make sure that that area of your team is stocked with the best talent you can put together. And there are going to be a lot of guys in the transfer portal. I talked about these names yesterday, but we'll kind of cycle through some of the guys who have gone in the transfer portal over the years, that these are the types of players you got to get. C.J. Daniels is a heck of a player. I think he's a really good player. I think he'd be good for LSU if he came back next year. I think he's going to make an NFL roster. But I'm talking about Jamison Williams, who went in the first round, Ohio State to Bama. I'm talking about Jermaine Burton from Georgia to Bama, who made a huge impact there. I'm talking about Isaiah Bond from Alabama to Texas, who's playing for an SEC championship this week. Keon Coleman from Mississippi State, or Michigan State, down to Florida State. Becomes a high draft pick and plays on an unbeaten team. I'm talking about those kind of guys. Jordan Addison wins the Biletnikoff at Pitt, goes to USC. Like, that's the kind of playmaker that's available almost every year. I'm also not telling you that it has to be from the elite of the elite. You can find great players if your scouting and evaluation is correct. Trey Harris came from Louisiana Tech, and he was the best receiver in the country this year. Just couldn't get on the field. I would even go as far as to say, and some of you are going to shake your head at this, I watched this guy play a lot this year. He's really good. I would take him on next year's LSU roster like that. Andrew Armstrong at Arkansas finished 4th in the country in receiving yards per game. He had over 100 yards per game receiving for an Arkansas offense that was good at some points, but not good. I mean, LSU shut him down. They had Taylon Green pulling the trigger. They found him at Texas A&M Commerce. Okay? Missouri found the SEC's leading rusher at a D3 school 2 years ago. So I'm not as concerned with exactly what school he comes from. I'm not telling you you can only recruit receivers that went to USC, Ohio State, Clemson, Bama, and Miami. Like, just get the right one. Maybe get the right 2. And this, to me, as I sit here right now, lots of things can change over the next 2 weeks. We all know that. But as I sit here right now, this is the litmus test for how well LSU can play ball. This signing class, in my opinion, is good. You had some defections late, but it's good. You've got to hit some home runs in the transfer portal if you want to be competitive next year. And it's not every single year that you've got a second-year returning starting quarterback who's in his 5th year, who's a projected top 40 pick in the NFL draft. Is that fair with Nussmeier? I think it is. So if you want to make that into a championship contending team with the schedule that you've got to play next fall, you better find some playmakers, and you better spend some money on it. I don't need any, well, it got a little bit too rich for our blood. No, sorry. At this point, if the boosters in the collective have put the money in there and said, okay, go use it, you use that money and you go get a wide receiver. This is different than we've ever spoken about collegiate athletics before. I've never had this conversation. We're having it now because I'm looking at this wide receiver group. I'm looking at the quarterback. I'm looking at what's in the portal every single year. I'm looking at what LSU has had happen to it on the recruiting trail for the last 2 years, and I'm going, change it. That's got to happen for this team at that position in the next 3 weeks.
Hey, thanks for watching Hunt on LSU. Before you get out of here, do us a couple of favors. Hit that like button, leave your comments below, and subscribe to the channel for all your Fighting Tiger football talk. See you next time.